Welcome to this segment of Streams, Pods, and God, part of Retro Rewind Plays. Tonight we're going to be... Oh, I'm Francisco. I don't usually introduce myself, but tonight we're going to be talking about how to choose content to invest time in. And this actually was inspired by a suggestion that Dallas Moore from Geek Devotions gave me. So thank you so much, Dallas, for the suggestion. So we're going to be talking about what type of content should you invest your time into making in streaming, in podcasting, and then what kind of content what books of the Bible should you be focused on in terms of reading? So consuming that content or experiencing the biblical stories. So we're going to be talking about those things. Probably not going to be interacting with chat too much, but you can catch this on YouTube later, and definitely like and share and subscribe if you like this content. But let's start with streaming. How do you choose the type of content to invest time in when you're a streamer? Like right now, we're Twitch streaming. You can catch these, of course, live at twitch.tv/RetroRewindPod on Monday nights. So if you're trying to pick, say, a game, or if you're an artist, should I stream to an art channel, or should I do always on or vlogging or things like that, or IRL streaming? When you're trying to pick what you should stream to, here are the things to think about. And this is going to be a bit game focused, since that's still a lot of what Twitch is, and that's what I'm doing. But this could be for most any type of streaming you want to do. So I've heard several when I've watched other people who talk about streaming talk about this subject. It's the main three things I hear. Actually, the main two things I hear are pick a game that you love to play. So that's important. That's one way to pick a game or make content. The other is pick games that are popular, because then, welcome, Fabulous Lomax. Thank you so much for the raid. We're in the middle of our Streams, Pods, and God segment, talking about how to choose content for streaming, podcasting, and as a Christ follower, what books in the Bible to read. So we're right now in streaming. So choosing a game, so you can choose a game you love. You can choose a game that's really popular. You can also, I don't hear this one as much, but you can choose a game that doesn't have very much competition in terms of there might be a lot of viewers, but not necessarily many channels streaming that game. And last, which I've never really heard anyone say, but I think this could be one that's important to consider when you're deciding if you're going to stream, what game you're going to stream or what thing you're going to stream, is pick what community do you want to be a part of in terms of a game community, like if it's a community around Fortnite, or a community around Destiny or Magic the Gathering or what have you. So so let's go into each of these a little bit more detail and talk about sort of a little bit of the pros and cons of it. So, welcome. Let's see who's here. Spaldingo, welcome, and Fabulous, welcome. Thanks for being here, guys. I'm not interacting with chat so much during this, but so glad you're here. So, a game you love. Why would you pick a game you love? Or how'd you pick a game you would love? Well, that's kind of obvious. What games you love to play, and that's the one you pick. I'm going to just stream that. But if you stream a game you love, it may not necessarily be a game that has a lot of relevancy. It may not be a game that has a lot of people in the channel watching it. For instance, a game that I thought would be really cool to watch was Cuphead when it came out. But now, it's one of my followed game categories in Twitch. But whenever I check it, it has like maybe a couple hundred people watching, at most 500. It's very rare when I see it top over 500. And that's pretty small for a game. And it used to be really popular. So you may love Cuphead, but it may not be a good game in terms of getting yourself exposed to a broad audience of people that are interested in Cuphead. So you may say, okay, well, I'm not going to pick a game I love. I'll pick a popular game. Fortnite's huge, or Red Dead Redemption just came out, or some other game that I can't think of that maybe just got released. Oh, Super Smash Ultimate. I'll stream one of those because lots of people are going to be trying to watch that. That's true. There will be lots of people trying to watch it, but there's probably also going to be tons of people that are streaming that game. So unless you're a huge streamer with a large following, you're going to be at the very bottom of the directory. And now that Twitch has these tagging features, like what you could tag retro, first playthrough, or you're 100% in a game, or lots of different things, that is a way for people to find you, possibly. But I still think that's fairly new, and people aren't using that feature that often. So that's kind of the downfall of picking something that's popular or a new release. So you may say, okay, well, let's try to split the difference. What's something that's maybe popular in terms of lots of people are looking for it, but maybe not a lot of people are streaming it? And that's where you may go to a site like twitchstrike.com. And that's where you can look for any game and see, okay, when are the most popular times to play that game? Is there a good ratio of viewers to channels, to a number of viewers to a few number of channels that are engaged in that game? Like, for instance, if I go there now, let me refresh the page. If let's say I wanted to pick a game now, like, okay, I'm going to stream Monday nights at 8 o'clock. What would be the ideal game or thing to stream that has a lot of people interested in it, but maybe not so many channels streaming it? And it's taking a while to load, so I'll go with, twitchstrike.com. Exactly, Geek Devotions, thank you. I'll just go with what was there before. Always on, so if you're going to stream 24/7, that's popular. ASMR, slots, apparently a lot of people like to watch gambling. And wrestling. I'm not sure if that's like actual wrestling or a game called wrestling, but apparently those are the channels that there's a lot of people watching it, but very few channels streaming those. So that's one where you could look for competition. But I mean, maybe you aren't a gambler, so you would never choose slots, so you might do it, but you're not going to be enthused about it at all. You're not going to be, it could be a game, you may pick a game that, sure, there's a low competition, but I don't care at all about whatever that game is or whatever that thing is. Then the last criteria is, okay, so maybe you should stream based on a community you want to be a part of. Let's say you really love the people who stream Destiny 2, and you want to be a part of that community and add to the conversation of Destiny 2. Or you really love retro games. I mean, that's a lot of what we do here is retro games. I really have this sort of, and you might call it a heart. I've started having this bigger and bigger emphasis on thinking it'd be an amazing thing if the retro channel could be filled, the retro directory could be filled with channels of people streaming family-friendly content where people my age who have small kids could expose, maybe they don't have retro systems, but they could expose their kids that are young, maybe, I don't know, from 5 to 10, to these older games that, hey, I love this game growing up. I want you to see what it was like. And it's hard to share if you're not watching either a channel that's very interactive or not watching a channel that is family-friendly. It's very hit or miss to do that, but I'd love it if the retro directory was filled with channels like that. So I don't know where I can be in that conversation, but I'd like to see the retro community go there. So all that said, how do you pick which one you're gonna pick? So which is the best way to go, Francisco? You gave me a lot of options here, but you gave me ways about how I shouldn't stream in any of these. So what do I do? Well, you Venn diagram all four, and you pick the game that it best fits in all four of those. So what's a game that you love that might also have some popularity, that may not have that many people streaming it, but lots of people interested, and also one that is a game, probably if it's a game you love, it's a game you'll want to build a community in, and maybe there's an established community already. So I would try to shoot for three of the four of those, and I think that's where you might, it depends on how you define success, whether or not you'll have success with that. But I think if you stream with that mentality of trying to focus in to a game or an activity with that in mind, I'm pretty sure you're going to have at least moral success. Like your morale will be all the better for it. Hopefully that was helpful in terms of picking content to stream. Now let's talk about a little bit about podcasting. The podcasting in God won't be as in-depth as that. I just had a lot to say for streaming. So now we'll go on to podcasting. Let me address chat here real quick. Dale says, Thumb Championship Wrestling? It wasn't that. That would be amazing. Fight Tom Thumb. Epic Thumb Wrestling. That would be quite amazing. And Geek Devotion says, love when parents can share their nostalgic retro game shows, hobbies with their kids. Oh, totally. I know there is someone who listens to the podcast who's really into like toy train sets. And I think if I'm remembering correctly, he told me that that's because his dad was really into big train sets when he was growing up. So it's really cool when we get to pass these hobbies and these activities down to our kids, and it sort of just creates this legacy of tradition, and it's just a nice thing. Moving on to podcasts, though, if you're wondering, okay, I'm going to start a podcast. How do I pick what content to go into? We've touched on this in previous streams, Pods and God, sort of assessing what you're interested in, what you're passionate about. But I'm actually going to take a little bit deeper here. So I'm going to give an example here. Actually, I'm going to give the overview first. So what you're going to do is you're going to establish what your interest is. Then you're going to want to think about, okay, what's a subset or a specialty within that interest that is really appealing, that appeals the most to me. And then you're going to look at that specialty and pick a component of it that you really, really love. And that's what you should be podcasting about. It's, if you've heard the term niching down or niching down, that's what that is. You're trying to get super specific in what you want to podcast about, because you're going to have a lot greater likelihood. There may not be as many people out there that are interested in that thing, but the people who are interested are going to be diehard interested in that thing, especially if you bring a lot of passion to that same thing. So, bye, Fabulous. Thanks so much for being here. Consume Fire, the guy 3. Oh, yeah, exactly. That's a good example, Dale, of Consuming Fire, passing that on to his kids. Yeah, establish your entrance and then niche down. Geek Devotions. So let's take an example of this. So let's say I know someone here in stream, Leslie for short, really loves books. So let's say, okay, I love books so much. I'm gonna do a podcast about books. Okay, well, that's ridiculously general, and yeah, you might hit a wide audience with that, but so few people are gonna care about. You'll get people that like maybe one episode, but then don't listen to any others because they're all about various things that they don't care about. They like this one book or this one author, and that's it. They don't care about any of these others. So, okay, you love books. Okay, so what about books do you like? Do you like the actual stories? Do you like the authors of the books? Do you like the way books are made? Maybe you're really into like graphic design of covers, or the way books are bound and the whole press procedure of books. I mean, there's lots of different things that go into books. Maybe the publishing world, you want to do sort of a deep dive into how books are published and talking to authors about how they get their books published. Lots of aspects, but let's go with, you love books, you love the stories in books. Okay, so pick a genre. Let's say you really love the sci-fi genre. Okay, that's good. That's a bit more niche, but that's still pretty broad. Okay, how can we niche down in sci-fi better? Okay, well, there's cyberpunk, there's dystopian, which is kind of just like cyberpunk. There's aliens, there's sort of near future, just the future is just a little bit a little ahead. There's time travel, there's genetic manipulation, clones, lots of different places you could go. So let's pick the sub genre of sci-fi of, let's say, genetics or cloning, human cloning, and AI, and sort of the cyborgs and all that sort of niche. Okay, now find the books and the authors that you really love in that, and talk about those books. You only have 2 books. You love that genre and that subgenre, but you only have like 2 books that you've read in that, and you don't have time to read a bunch more books. What do I do now? I can't create content out of 2 books. I mean, you could probably find a way, but it's not going to last forever, and it's hard to maintain that. So what do you do? Okay, well, now you have to step back some. You try to niche down as much as you could, and you found, I'm not going to be able create enough content in that sub niche. And that's super important if you want your podcast to go any length of time, is creating content. So you take a step back, you sort of niche up a little bit until you get to a point where, okay, now I can figure out a long stretch of content, several episodes where I can continue the content stream. And that, I think, is the sweet spot for figuring out what content and what niche you want to actually create a podcast around. So hopefully that was helpful. Dale says, book talk, exactly. Sounds like producing a documentary on the Science Channel. How the book got its spine. Exactly, Dale, exactly. Geek Devotion says, time-traveling space cowboy hunting his evil clone who wants to release an alien army from its magical doom card by cyberpunk warriors. Amazing. Write that book now, please. I will read it. I mean, and I'll make a podcast about it. 1 episode podcast. It'll be amazing. Okay, that totally goes against what I just said, but we're having funsies here. All right, so we talked about how to make content for your streams, make content for your podcast. Now let's talk about let's go to the Bible. How do you pick what to read in the Bible? Let's say whether you're new to Christianity or you've been a Christian for a while. Most people, I'm gonna guess, have not read the whole Bible. I did take a couple years and just very slowly made my way through the whole Bible. So I'm one of those who have read the whole Bible, but it was over the span of, I think, a couple years. So it wasn't very much at a time. So I'm sure I could do with having some repeat exposure. I mean, throughout your whole life, you should repeat your exposure to the Bible if you're a Christian, because 10 years from now, you look at the same passage you look at today, could have a completely new meaning and impact for you. It's amazing how the Bible is timeless in that way. But okay, here you are today, not 10 years from now, here you are today. How do you pick what to read in the Bible? Well, if you haven't read through the whole Bible, pick one of the books that you haven't read. I mean, that's probably the simplest and most straightforward. You just pick a book that you haven't read before, whether it's Joel or whether it's Daniel. I just read through Daniel real recently. Man, so cool that there's so much of Revelation and so much that John picks up on in the book of Revelation that comes from Daniel. And that's where Jesus gets his language of the Son of Man, is from the book of Daniel. So it's just a remarkable book. And and that sort of leads into my next one. Pick a book that, even if you've read it before, one that sort of strikes your interest or has, you remember it having compelling elements. Or maybe you heard your pastor say, hey, or say, we're going to go through this book. Why don't you read it along with us? And that's another way to go, is in picking a book from the Bible is, let's say you hear, again, your pastor say, we're going to be reading through this book, or a Christian podcast you listen to, we're going to be working through this book. Like, for instance, Christian Geek Central is going to be working through the book of James. So I started reading James just so I could sort of catch up. I'm like, oh my gosh, James, you're talking about how faith without works is dead, and you don't come and you don't, let's see, you don't get salvation by faith alone. It's with works too. I'm like, but Paul was saying not that. He's saying salvation is through faith alone. And they're both using the example of Abraham. It's like, or not Abraham. Yeah, Abraham and Isaac. It's like, you guys are both talking about the same thing and coming at it from different angles. So I'm very interested to see. It's cool how that's spinning my gears about how that's going to be talked about by Peter in his podcast. And it gets me thinking about how do I resolve that for myself as a believer, the whole faith works thing. So the last element you could do is pick books of the Bible that sort of correspond with easy to remember markers in the calendar. Like, pick a book of the Bible. I honestly am not sure if there's one like this, but it only has 7 chapters. Then you can read a chapter a day for a week, and you've read a book in the Bible. Another great one that I was doing for a while is Proverbs, which is 31 chapters. So you read a chapter each day, and for a month, and you usually get through most months, and you get through all of Proverbs. So those are some good ways to invest in the content of the Bible, investing your energy and your time and your focus and your mind in being spiritually renewed by the Bible. So those were the three ways of how to choose the content you invest time into. For streaming, it's sort of that sweet spot of a game you love, a game that's popular or relevant, a game that's doesn't have a lot of people streaming it, yet high viewership, and a game that you want to build a community around. If you can get a game that's in all of those, you've got made as far as I'm concerned. But if you have that and you don't have it made, then tell me your story. I'd love to hear about that and tell me how I'm wrong. Because then I could learn too. For podcasts, you want to niche down as far as you can until you get to a point where you're not going to be able to produce much of any content, maybe one episode, and then you want to work your way back until you can actually have a sustained content flow. And then for the Bible, you want to read books you haven't read before, ones that are really interesting to you, or ones you can read along with someone else. So thank you so much to everyone in chat. Thank you to you watching. If this has been valuable to you, please leave a comment below. Please like, share, and subscribe. And catch us on twitch.tv/RetroRewindPod Monday nights for more talks like this, and Friday nights for just fun retro playing games and podcasts when I'm on the podcast. And check out RetroRewindPodcast.com for our amazing podcast. All right. Have a good one. Bye.